She thought it was just another ordinary night. But in a matter of minutes, love turned into betrayal, and trust turned into terror. What started as a simple conversation ended in a brutal crime that shocked an entire community. Sariah Acosta was an 18-year-old girl with a bright future ahead. She had recently graduated from high school and was passionate about softball. She was well-loved by her friends and family, known for her kindness and cheerful personality. On the night of February 1st, 2023, she had no idea that her life was about to take a tragic turn. Devian Lewis, a 22-year-old man, had been in a relationship with Sariah. Their relationship had its ups and downs, but no one expected it to end in violence. That night, the two met in a parking lot in Rancho Cordova, California. Witnesses later reported that they seemed to be having a serious conversation. Suddenly, the situation escalated. Devian pulled out a knife and attacked Sariah. She tried to defend herself, but the attack was too sudden and brutal. She collapsed on the ground, bleeding from multiple stab wounds. The quiet parking lot became the scene of a horrific crime. As Sariah lay there struggling to breathe, Devian got in his car. Instead of running away, he did something even more shocking. He started the engine, stepped on the gas, and drove straight towards Sariah, hitting her before speeding away into the night. The parking lot, once silent, was now filled with chaos. A few bystanders who had witnessed the attack quickly called 911. Paramedics and police officers arrived within minutes, but it was already too late. Sariah Acosta had succumbed to her injuries. Her tragic death left the community in shock and mourning. Meanwhile, Devian Lewis was on the run. Instead of stopping to face what he had done, he sped away, trying to escape. Police officers quickly identified his vehicle and launched a manhunt. As news of the brutal attack spread, Sariah's family and friends struggled to understand why this had happened. Devian drove recklessly, knowing that authorities were closing in on him. Soon, California Highway Patrol officers spotted his car near Elk Grove and began a high-speed chase. Devian refused to stop, pushing his vehicle to dangerous speeds. The chase continued for several miles before Devian's car was finally forced to a halt. But he wasn't ready to surrender. As officers approached him, he reached for something in his car. Believing he was armed, police opened fire, hitting him multiple times. He collapsed, wounded but alive. Officers rushed in and took him into custody. As Devian Lewis lay wounded, officers quickly secured the scene and called for medical assistance. Paramedics arrived and treated his injuries before transporting him to the hospital. Despite being shot, he survived and was placed under police watch. Meanwhile, investigators started piecing together what had led to the horrific events of that night. Sariah Acosta's family was devastated. The news of her brutal murder spread quickly, leaving her loved ones in shock and disbelief. Friends and classmates mourned her loss, remembering her as a bright and loving young woman with dreams for the future. Candlelight vigils were held in her honor, and tributes poured in on social media. Authorities formally charged Devian Lewis with murder. Prosecutors built their case, gathering witness statements, security footage, and forensic evidence. The brutality of the crime made headlines, and the case gained widespread attention. During questioning, Devian showed no remorse for his actions. Some sources suggested that jealousy and anger had driven him to commit the crime. However, investigators were still trying to determine if the attack had been planned or if it was a moment of uncontrolled rage. As the legal proceedings began, the community demanded justice for Sariah. As the investigation progressed, police gathered strong evidence against Devian Lewis. Witnesses confirmed that he had brutally attacked Sariah Acosta before running her over with his car. Surveillance footage and forensic reports further strengthened the case. Prosecutors charged him with first-degree murder, reckless endangerment, and evading law enforcement. The crime left the community in shock, and many people demanded justice for Sariah. Sariah's family was heartbroken. Her parents spoke publicly about their daughter, remembering her as a kind and ambitious young woman with a bright future ahead. Friends and classmates mourned her loss, sharing their grief on social media. A candlelight vigil was held in her honor, where people gathered to pay their respects and support her family. Meanwhile, Devian remained in police custody, recovering from his injuries. Authorities closely monitored him as he awaited trial. The case gained national attention, with growing pressure to ensure justice was served. As the trial date approached, more details about Devian Lewis and his relationship with Sariah Acosta emerged. Investigators discovered that their relationship had been troubled for some time. Some of Sariah's friends revealed that she had expressed concerns about Devian's behavior. She had tried to distance herself from him, but he refused to let go. His jealousy and controlling nature had caused tension between them in the weeks leading up to the attack. Prosecutors argued that Devian's actions were not impulsive but planned. They presented messages and call records showing that he had been obsessively trying to contact Sariah before the attack. His decision to bring a weapon and his attempt to flee after the crime further proved his intent. Meanwhile, Sariah's family continued to seek justice. They attended court hearings, determined to see Devian held accountable. The community also stood by them, showing support through rallies and online campaigns. As the trial began, the courtroom was filled with emotions. Sariah Acosta's family sat in the front row, holding back tears as prosecutors described the horrific details of her murder. The prosecution presented strong evidence, including witness testimonies, security footage, and forensic reports, all proving that Devian Lewis had planned and carried out the brutal attack. Witnesses recalled the terrifying moments of that night, describing how Devian had stabbed Sariah multiple times before running her over with his car. The jury watched surveillance footage that captured parts of the attack, leaving many in the courtroom visibly shaken. The prosecution argued that this was not a crime of passion, but a calculated act of violence driven by jealousy and control. Devian's defense team tried to argue that he had acted in the heat of the moment, but the overwhelming evidence made it difficult to support that claim. The trial continued, with the world watching closely. During the trial, Sariah Acosta's mother took the stand, her voice trembling as she spoke about her daughter. She described Sariah as a loving, ambitious young woman who had her whole life ahead of her. She told the jury about Sariah's dreams, her kindness, and how her death had shattered their family. Many in the courtroom, including jurors, were visibly emotional as they listened. The prosecution continued to present damning evidence against Devian Lewis. Experts testified that the number and severity of Sariah's stab wounds indicated an intentional, rage-fueled attack. The medical examiner confirmed that she had suffered greatly before she died. Prosecutors also pointed out that Devian had a chance to stop after the stabbing, but instead he chose to run her over with his car, proving clear intent. Throughout the trial, Devian showed little emotion. His cold and detached demeanor only reinforced the image of him as a remorseless killer. After weeks of testimonies and evidence, the case was finally handed over to the jury. The courtroom was silent as everyone waited for the verdict. The prosecution had presented overwhelming evidence, showing that Devian Lewis had not only brutally attacked Sariah Acosta, but also made an effort to escape justice. The defense, on the other hand, struggled to convince the jury that Devian had acted out of sudden emotional distress. The jury deliberated for several hours before reaching a decision. When they returned to the courtroom, Sariah's family held hands, bracing themselves for the outcome. The judge asked the jury for their verdict, and the foreman stood up. With a steady voice, he announced, "Guilty of first-degree murder." Gasps and quiet sobs filled the room. Sariah's family hugged each other, relieved that justice had been served. Devian showed little reaction as the verdict was read. The sentencing phase of the trial followed soon after. The prosecution argued for the maximum sentence, emphasizing the brutality of the crime. They played recordings of Sariah's last moments and presented impact statements from her family and friends. Her mother, with tears in her eyes, told the court how their lives would never be the same. She spoke of the pain of losing a daughter and the emptiness left in their hearts. The judge, after considering all aspects of the case, delivered the final sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. The decision was met with both relief and sorrow. While Devian would never walk free again, nothing could bring Sariah back. Her family left the courtroom with heavy hearts, knowing they had won the fight for justice, but lost someone they loved forever. In the aftermath of the trial, Sariah's family focused on keeping her memory alive. They started a foundation in her name to raise awareness about abusive relationships and to help young people recognize the warning signs of toxic behavior. Schools and community organizations invited them to speak, ensuring that Sariah's story would serve as a lesson to others. The case became a symbol of the devastating consequences of possessive and violent relationships. Many people, inspired by Sariah's story, spoke out about their own experiences and sought help before it was too late. Though Sariah was gone, her legacy lived on, reminding the world that love should never come with fear. Her family found comfort in knowing that justice had been served, but they would always carry the pain of losing her. Sariah Acosta's name became more than just a memory. It became a call for change, ensuring that her story would never be forgotten. Sariah Acosta's story is a heartbreaking reminder of how toxic and controlling relationships can lead to devastating consequences. No one deserves to live in fear or be trapped in a dangerous situation. If you or someone you know is experiencing emotional, verbal, or physical abuse, don't stay silent. Reach out for help. Talk to a trusted friend, family member, or professional. Organizations and hotlines are available to provide support, guidance, and protection for those in need. Recognizing the warning signs early can save lives. Let Sariah's story be a lesson to us all. Stand up against domestic violence. Educate others about the dangers of abusive relationships and support those who need help. Together, we can create a world where love is built on trust, respect, and safety. If you see the signs, speak up, because silence can be deadly.